You ever had that happen? Where someone in your life just vanishes? One day you're connected, and the next, there's just silence. It is such a confusing and honestly a painful experience that leaves you with a million unanswered questions. So, okay, let's dive into the psychology behind why this actually happens.
Right, this is the big mystery we're going to try and unpack here. It's a behavior that can feel so incredibly personal, so hurtful, but as we're about to see, the reasons behind it are way more complex and, believe it or not, often have a lot less to do with you than you might think.
And that's what makes it so baffling, isn't it? There wasn't some big dramatic blow-up, no yelling match, no final confrontation. It was just a fade to black. They stop answering texts, they stop showing up, and before you even realize what's happening, that whole connection is just gone.
Okay, this slide right here perfectly frames what we're talking about. On the one hand, you've got our go-to assumptions. We label the person as cold, arrogant, maybe even unstable. But on the other side, the psychological reality tells a totally different story. It's a story about overload, about protection, and sometimes about profound personal growth. Let's dig into these hidden drivers. So our first stop is a concept that is just so relevant today: psychological overload. And this isn't about someone being weak. It's about the very real, hard limits of our own mental and emotional gas tanks.
I want you to think of your brain like a circuit breaker in your house. When there's way too much pressure, constant arguments, endless criticism, or just overwhelming emotional demands, it gets completely exhausted. And to stop from blowing a fuse entirely, it trips into a protective mode. And sometimes, the absolute simplest way to cut that pressure is to create distance. And these are the big ones. These are the specific things that can push a person right over the edge. It might be a relationship that feels like it's just defined by conflict, or a friendship that feels more like a constant critique, or, and this is a big one, carrying the heavy weight of being everybody else's emotional support. When that stress goes on for too long, the brain just starts desperately looking for an escape hatch. And this right here highlights the huge gap between how it looks and how it feels. What seems like this sudden, dramatic, and really hurtful action to us on the outside can actually feel like a desperate gasp for air for the person on the inside. It's finally being able to put down an unbearable weight.
All right, let's move on to our next section and see how this all connects. Because beyond just simple overload, cutting people off can be a really powerful act of self-protection, especially for people who have tolerated way too much for way too long.
So here's something that's absolutely crucial to get. A lot of people who suddenly cut ties have spent years, maybe even decades, with really poor boundaries. You know them, the people pleasers, the ones who are always saying yes when they really mean no. A boundary awakening is that breaking point. It's a sudden, powerful moment where they realize the only way to heal isn't to just adjust the rules, it's to remove the source of the disrespect completely.
Does this pattern feel at all familiar? Before that big sudden shift, there's usually a really long history of ignoring red flags, of putting up with behavior they knew they shouldn't have, and giving chance after chance after chance. The final act of cutting someone off, well, it isn't the first chapter of the story. It's the last chapter of a very long book.
And then you have the impact of betrayal. I mean, when someone you deeply, deeply trust hurts you, it can fundamentally rewire how your brain sees relationships. It goes on high alert, constantly scanning for any potential threat, any sign of being hurt again. It's basically a trauma response.
And when you're in that state of betrayal sensitivity, just trying to maintain relationships can feel like walking through a minefield. The fear of repeating that original pain is so intense that removing people from your life doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like the only possible way to guarantee your own safety.
Which brings us to our final set of reasons, and these are centered on two really powerful forces: just complete and total emotional burnout and the incredible process of building a brand new self.
Oh, this path to burnout is so common. It often starts with that person who's the designated support system for their entire friend group or family. They listen to everyone, they absorb all the problems, and they carry that emotional weight until they just hit a wall. They burn out. And at that point, the mind isn't craving more connection, it's craving peace. Stepping away isn't about rejecting other people, it's about finally recovering their own energy.
You know, sometimes cutting people off is just a symptom of something way bigger going on. It's a sign of a complete identity shift. A person might wake up one day and realize that their old life, their old friends, their old habits, the places they used to go, it just doesn't fit the person they're growing into anymore. Psychologists call this identity reconstruction.
And this kind of profound change is almost always kicked off by major life events, a really tough heartbreak, a significant failure, a traumatic experience, or even just a period of intense personal growth. Any of these can make you look at your life and realize you need to build a new one from scratch, and that very often means leaving parts of the old one behind.
So, after exploring all of these deep psychological drivers, we can arrive at a totally new and frankly more compassionate way of looking at this whole thing. It really is time to shift our perspective.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from all of this. While being cut off feels like a malicious, personal attack, it is so much more often a desperate, necessary act of self-preservation. It's about survival, not about spite.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought, because reframing it this way, it changes everything. Instead of asking, what did I do wrong? What if the more insightful question is, what were they trying to save themselves from? And looking at it that way, it moves us from a place of being hurt to a place of understanding. And maybe, just maybe, even empathy.